Hi, Professor Dunstan and group members. This is my final for ESP 255. I'm just going to jump in and start by answering the first question. So the first question being, what have you learned? I think that mainly I've had three really strong takeaways from this course. The first one being to offer multiple means of representation for students. The second being to gradually reduce scaffolding throughout each lesson using the I do, we do, you do method. And the third being to always provide students with multiple ways to express their knowledge. So why is all this stuff important? Question 2. The first thing, offering multiple means of representation is so important because every single student learns so differently, and every student in your classroom is going to benefit from a different means of representing the same material. So as a teacher, it's really important to be focused on how your students learn and what you can do to make content accessible to your students. And probably one of the most important things that I learned in regards to multiple means of representation is to separate the means from the end result of a lesson. So the lesson objective shouldn't include anything outside of the main takeaway. It shouldn't include cutting and pasting if that's not the objective. It shouldn't include being able to read if that's not the objective. And so you really need to find ways to make content accessible to students at all skill levels with all different strengths, and always be playing to your students' strengths to help build up their weaknesses. The second takeaway and why it's important to gradually reduce scaffolding. In the beginning of each lesson, the teacher needs to be setting expectations and showing what's going to be happening for the rest of the lesson, how to complete everything successfully, and what the students are going to be doing. And from there, and only there, can students really have an understanding of what's expected of them, of how to complete this. They've seen it done by the teacher, and at that point they're ready to do it with a lot of guidance in the we do stage. And as the students grow more and more familiar with a concept, they'll be given more and more responsibility for the outcomes of the lesson, and eventually, given appropriate scaffolding, the students will be able to complete the lesson outcomes on their own independently and begin building new skills. So it's really crucial that students are receiving the support they need to feel confident and to feel really capable of completing the lesson outcomes independently. And then the third takeaway, providing students with multiple means to express knowledge, is something that before this course I had not had very much experience with at all. I went to public school and I'm very familiar with the paper and pencil tasks and, filling out a worksheet or answering questions online or filling out a test for writing an essay, perhaps, for an assessment of what I have learned. And as kind of the traditional learner, I'm a strong writer and strong reader, and that was always effective for me to express my knowledge. And I think because of that, I never had an opportunity to consider what it would be like if I knew something and wasn't able to express it in the way the teacher was asking for. So this class really opened my eyes to the idea of multiple means of expression. So not just representation of the material on my end, but representation of the material by my students, and giving them access to whatever means necessary, whatever means fit their strengths and their ability level and their comfort zone to express what they've learned about a topic and express their understanding of lesson outcomes, regardless of how that looks or sounds or whatever. If they're showing me that they know it, that's what counts, bottom line. And I mean, just like for this final, we have the opportunity to share it in whatever way makes sense to us. And for me, I'm a really strong verbal communicator, and so it felt really like the best fit for me to make a video. But for some students, they're not comfortable either public speaking, or they really need time to work things out and write them down and work out their thoughts. not as much express them verbally. Some people are better at creating a visual representation, so it's really important for all students to have access to the thing that will help them best express their knowledge and give the teacher a real accurate depiction of what they've learned. And then the final question, question number 3, how will I use this information in my future classroom? So my first takeaway, offering multiple means of representation, is definitely something that I will use every single day for every single lesson as a teacher, because a great teacher is thoughtfully considering how each student learns. And if you have a good idea of how each student can access information, can practice their skills, can best learn, then you will be able to find resources, be that through your colleagues or perhaps through the UDL exchange, which we've all interacted with this semester. You can find ways to meet the needs of all types of learners and not just the traditional paper and pencil tasks. And along with that, I think that in order to really be practicing UDL principles, you have to also practice reflective teaching and spend time thinking about how a lesson went and how your students were able to grasp the content that you put before them, and to plan activities that all students are going to grow from. And if you haven't done that, then you can take time to find a way to better visit the material and maybe go back and reteach something if it didn't work well for your students, and to be really open and honest about your practice and understand that not every lesson is perfect and you are always going to have room to grow. The second thing, the scaffolding throughout each lesson. That was my second takeaway from this course. How will I use that in my future classroom? Also, it's kind of a big key in practicing UDL in the classroom is to practice. I do, we do, you do. So I think that that is another thing that I will use day in and day out. I think students are definitely more successful if they have this gradual release of responsibility where you're not just dumping an assignment on them all at once and leaving them to figure it out for themselves, where I think when you do that, students become really discouraged and frustrated with the content, and you never want a student to feel that way. It just doesn't foster success or really healthy, positive behavior. And so I think that by practicing I do, we do, you do, I will be able to set clear expectations and have different needs, and really my scaffolding should reflect the needs of each individual student. So for every kid in the classroom, it's not going to look the same. It's not going to be the same level of support, because there's kids at the top who are outperforming whatever support I may be offering, kids in the middle who need exactly what I'm offering in whole group, and then kids more towards the bottom of my class who are going to need different and more structured and more hands-on intervention and support, and that's something that I need to always be watching for and aware of. And then the third thing about having students, about giving students multiple means of expression, is to provide students with all different ways to express their knowledge to me. And I think a big piece of this and how to practice this in the classroom is to be very open-minded, to give students freedom, which they don't often have in school, to say, okay, you can show me in whatever way makes sense to you that you understand this lesson, that you've taken something away from it, that you have mastered the skill and are ready to move on, or so I can gauge where they're at and know, okay, they understood this, but we need some more work on this part of the lesson, or we need to go back and visit this concept from 3 lessons ago because it's going to help with the comprehension of whatever content I'm teaching at that time. And so it's important to give the students the option of expressing verbally or written or visually what they have learned. and to give really direct expectations and really clear objectives for students, so that when I do like give them that freedom, they're not just kind of lost and not sure how to show me what they've learned. So it's kind of this fine balance of structure and freedom, and allowing students to do things the way that makes sense for them while also meeting a really clear cut and reasonable expectation and goal for them. And that's my 3 questions and my final, and I look forward to hearing feedback from all of you.